Breaking news just into our newsroom. At least 2 people are dead and 4 are wounded in a shooting at a high school in Georgia.
I want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia.
Follows a weekend of events honoring the victims in the Appalachia High School shooting.
We do have a suspect in custody.
He notified us of the shooting that took place not too far from
Appalachia
here.
getting a
deadly
lot of
shooting at Appalachia High School.
Tragedy.
Appalachia High School.
Appalachia's tragedy.
At Appalachia High School.
Appalachia getting a lot
Deadly
of
shooting at Appalachia High School.
Appalachia's tragedy.
Appalachia High School.
Appalachia getting a lot of high school shooting.
Appalachia's tragedy.
I was scared I was going to die, to be honest.
Welcome to Point of View. Today we're going to be talking about gun violence in our schools. Gun violence is something that we here at Northview don't often think about. Johns Creek is a safe, sheltered place. It's rare that we as students have ever had to personally experience gun violence in this area, and yet guns have become such a pressing problem that even here, safety is not promised. There have been 144 gun violence incidents in K-12 schools since the start of the year. Think about that. Since 1999, the year of Columbine, considered by many to be the start of school shootings, 440 people have been killed, and 1,243 injured. Those numbers are staggering and easy to suppress. It's very easy to misunderstand the scale of this. 440 people is roughly the size of the Northview senior class of 2025, and 1,243 is roughly the number of all the students in this building. Think about that. Everyone in this building and all the lives attached to that. The families, the friends, the co-workers, the classmates, everyone that just a single person is connected to and cares about, in a place that we're supposed to grow in. And yet, none of this felt as real as it did on September 4th. It took Appalachia to help a lot of us feel the real, genuine pain that school shootings inflict. That morning, it was as normal for those deceased as it was for us. They woke up, put on their clothes, talked to their family, just like anyone else. They talked to their friends, they sat in class, and they lived their final moments on this earth in a way that anyone could, that any of us could. We all know the story from there. At 9:45, Colin Gray asked his algebra teacher if he could go to the front office. Upon being dismissed, he instead went to grab an AR-15 he had brought to school that day and went back to his math. We all know the story from there. At 9:45, Colin Gray asked his algebra teacher if he could go to the front office. Upon being dismissed, he instead went to grab an AR-15 he had brought to school that day and went back to his math class. As he approached, one of his classmates noticed that he was armed and refused to let him in. After it all was said and done, 4 people had been killed. 4 people that went to school that day just like anyone else. In the wake of this story, gun violence has been a very real thought we've all had to grapple with. From the threats the next day to the morbid conversations, Appalachia very quickly made school shootings a hot-button issue in Northview. There have been dozens of shootings in our time at school, but it took one 30 minutes away from us to really think. The horrors of Appalachia are not a new one. It's one so common that many of us have grown used to the news and only really thought about it once it was in our backyard. This wasn't the first school shooting, it won't be the last school shooting, or even the most violent one. There have and will continue to be story upon story of the lost lives in traumatized communities, and this will not stop until we create some form of change.
In the midst of recent events, many of us feel lost. Lost on how something like this could happen, lost on policy, lost on how a person like this was able to obtain a gun. In the United States, there's varying policy on who can obtain a gun, when they obtain the gun, and how they obtain the gun. There is no federal law saying that a background check or purchase permit is required for obtaining a handgun outside of federally licensed gun dealers. And according to the AAP, only 40% of gun purchases go through licensed gun dealers. There is no federal law that requires concealed carriers to obtain a permit. There is no federal law saying that firearms must be stored, locked, or even unloaded, which allows for children in the home to access their parents' firearms. In the United States, many students feel unsafe at school. According to the Child Welfare League of America, 57% of students feel that their school will be a site of a school shooting. Regardless of what side you lean on, it's clear that action needs to be taken. Some people advocate for gun laws to restrict access. Everytown, a nonprofit who advocates against gun violence, compiled the gun laws of all 50 states and ranked them numerically based on gun law strength and compared that to the gun deaths per 100,000 residents. There's a clear trend showing that increased gun regulation, there are decreased deaths. California, the state with the strongest gun law strength, has 8.6 deaths per 100,000 residents. Arkansas, ranked the lowest, has 21.9 deaths, 7.8 more than the national average. Others believe that the better option is addressing the mental health problem in the United States. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, more than 1 in 5 children aged 13 to 18 have had a serious mental illness at some point in their life. The Association of American Psychology claims that mental health treatment can reduce gun violence at the individual level. To quote, one major finding of the MacArthur risk assessment study was that getting continued mental health treatment in the community after release from psychiatric hospitalization reduced the number of violent acts by those who had been hospitalized. Beyond federal law, some argue for more local implementations of safety measures at school. Here in Georgia, Buford has implemented clear backpacks for all students, and several schools have implemented metal detectors at the doors of their schools. Here at Northview, we've seen an increase in armed security across the school. Of course, there is no perfect solution, but all events concerned, it would be common sense for our government, the people we have elected to take care of the people, to take action, regardless of the manner by which they do it. Instead, actions are washed over by promises of thoughts and prayers. In school, I feel afraid, and I know I'm not alone. At Northview and surrounding schools, new policemen roam the halls covered head to toe in protective gear. The day after Appalachia, our hallways were more than uneasy, trying to operate under threats and thoughts, policemen and prayers. And in the coming weeks, people stopped talking. But I and others still feel shaken. With 30 shootings just this year, for many people across the nation, Appalachia is just a statistic. But here in Johns Creek, less than an hour out, it hits closer to home.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm currently a senior here at Northview High School and the founder and president of Students Demand Action Northview. Essentially what Students Demand Action is it's a student cohort of the organization called Every Town for Gun Safety. So this is a national organization with chapters all over the country trying to mobilize youth in the fight against gun violence. So I recently started Northview's chapter my junior year of high school, so last year, and so this is our second year of SDA Northview, and I'm really happy to speak on the podcast today.
All right, and how does gun violence affect communities indirectly and directly?
Gun violence is something really complex because it affects people no matter where you are, no matter how old you are. We see shootings happen in public schools and private schools, at spas, Walmarts. It literally happens everywhere. So I would argue that gun violence is applicable and it honestly negatively affects everyone across the country. And that's what's most scary about it, because a lot of times you see it on the news and you're like, oh, that won't happen to me until it does happen to you. And recently, I know with the Appalachia shooting, it was right in our backyard, so it really affected everyone. It really shook people up, and people were really scared and upset and enraged that something so violent can, reach everyone's backyard.
Mm-hmm. So with that, do you have any ideas of how a school or community should better support students that are affected out of fear and or trauma?
Yeah, so when the Appalachia High School shooting happened, Students Demand Action, they were so quick to give me some trauma resources to send out. So I know that I personally knew some people at Appalachia, and that was honestly really scary for me because I didn't know yet who the victims were. Nobody knew who those were. So it was honestly really scary for me to find out that, maybe the people that I had met over the summer were the people at the shooting. And I know that was, similar to a lot of people who have interacted with students and parents and teachers from Appalachia. So just having schools and administrators hand out those trauma resources. You never know what somebody's going to be feeling after something like that happens. It's such a, honestly, such a cruel event that, could really shake people up. And so just really having schools, honestly, just having them understand where people are at and just having that kind of grace going into those periods after those shootings and those horrible events is just honestly something really important.
Mm-hmm. And then what role can students play in advocating for change in relation to gun violence?
I would say that Students Main Action is a great resource and a great hub for people to get involved in, but also just outside of Students Main Action, just making sure that you're, reading the news, that you're aware of what's going on in the world today. There's so much going out there. There's so much that happens every single day that, it's really easy to miss one thing, but just really making sure that you're involved. I mean, I know the election is coming up in November, so if you're old enough, I think it's really important that you use your civic right to vote, and you're going to the elections and you're going to polls and you're voting, and because that's what our country has fought so hard for the ability for youth to get involved, and for the ability for youth to really speak out about what's important to them, and just really starting that discourse, starting those discussions, having those difficult conversations with people even when they don't disagree with you is really important.
How does media coverage about gun violence shape teenagers' perspectives?
I would say that media is honestly such an important part in really advocating, because our country is so big. There's so many people that only find out about these things through media. I mean, I know the news and those headliners were something that really got the word out about the shooting, and that's how I figured it out. And so I know that Students Main Action, they publish a bunch of blogs and resources and articles. A bunch of different research that they do is published through their website. So that's honestly a huge outlet. But I think that it's honestly such an important tool for people to get their voices out. And I know on television they do a bunch of interviews. A lot of reporters were probably at Appalachia just talking about the student voices. I know I saw some of them. I think it's really such an honestly a great opportunity for students who may not have their own platform to kind of create that platform and kind of get that word out and get their stories out. I saw a lot of people using TikTok and similar resources for that.
And then how should mental health be regarded with gun violence and the ability to own a gun?
Yeah, so I know Mental Health Month is September, so this is honestly such an important topic that we're discussing right now. I know that mental health obviously is a super important topic when it comes to gun violence, because a lot of times when you have a school shooting, like obviously that person probably isn't in the right mental state, because if you were in the right mental state, you probably wouldn't wake up and choose to kill other people. So honestly, just making sure that you're learning the signs. I know there's an organization called Sandy Hook Promise that was founded after the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012. And a lot of what they focus is trying to understand, what are some things that you can notice in a school shooter? Like a lot of the school shooters typically have the same signs and symptoms that they exhibit, mental health things that they're dealing with. And I know with this shooting specifically, there are previous things with the shooter's past that were kind of not ignored, but could have been paid more attention to. And so just making sure that people are cognizant and really understanding that people with mental health should be examined before they're able to purchase a firearm. I think that mental health checks are super important when it comes to purchasing a firearm, because I know that it's not to say that people can't purchase a gun or people can't hold a gun, but just making sure that those firearms are resting in the right people and that they're being used for that they're not being used for harm.
And then would stricter laws regarding guns result in less gun violence?
I would say so. I think there's a direct correlation with states that have stronger gun safety laws and states that don't. I think that if you look at Connecticut after the Sandy Hook shooting happened, I used to live there, so that's why I talk about Connecticut. But I know that after Sandy Hook, Connecticut was really, really, really active in passing gun safety legislation, making sure that none of that ever happened again, or nothing remotely as deadly as Sandy Hook would happen again. And since then, Connecticut's one of the states with the highest gun safety prevention laws. So I think that Georgia specifically has pretty lax gun safety laws, and I think that's obviously an issue, and it's something that should be not even looked at as partisan or politically, because it's something that affects everybody. I think that people and citizens in Georgia as a whole need to think about how we can move forward after these shootings occur, because they're happening every day. There's been more mass shootings than there are days today. So I think that having strict legislation and that passing those and advocating for that, telling your lawmakers to pass this law, that directly has an impact on the ability for people or the wrong people to take hold of a firearm and use it for harm.
And how does gun violence impact the future of our society and younger generations?
Well, if you look at it, the data, every year the rate for gun violence is increasing. Last year, I don't remember the specific amount, but it was quite a lot. It was in the hundreds for mass shootings. And mass shootings are defined as a shooting where 4 or more people are injured. And that rate is only increasing. I think last year, I don't want to say any specific numbers, but it's definitely increasing per year. And it's only going to increase as, generations keep getting older and time goes on. I know that Sandy Hook was in 2012, and after that, people were vowing to never let it happen again. And now here we are with Appalachia, and there's been so many other school shootings, Columbine. I know there's one in Oxford, one in Uvalde. All these different things that we see happening on the news. It's just honestly heartbreaking to see how it progresses and how, if we continue a path of inaction, we don't take initiative to talk about these things and to really raise awareness that this is only going to keep increasing. And it's honestly kind of scary to think about where the United States will lie if, this does keep happening.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, what's the comparison of gun violence within the U.S. versus other countries?
Yeah, I think the U.S. definitely has the largest rate of gun violence when it comes to mass shootings specifically. If you look at Australia or Canada, when these mass shootings happen, the people in charge and people in governmental positions, they take action, they pass laws so it never happens again, or it seldom happens. But in the U.S., I think that the political stigma around gun violence is so strong with that. Our government is so hesitant to pass laws to really prevent gun violence from happening. So I would say that the U.S. is definitely one of the biggest countries with the most resistance against gun safety laws, and that directly impacts the amount of gun violence that we experience per year.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about gun violence?
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone to get involved. I know that gun violence is something that's really important to me because I grew up near Sandy Hook when it happened, and a lot of the kids who passed away in that shooting were near my age. And obviously with Appalachia, those people are also my age. They're also very close to me. So you never really think it's going to happen until it does. And it's one of my biggest fears. I know no one wants to be caught in a mass shooting. No one wants to be in a public place or even in a private place where there's someone with a firearm that could easily cause harm, someone who doesn't have the right mental mindset going on, someone who doesn't really, know how to use a gun, or someone who accidentally accessed one from their parents or something like that. It's honestly just super important that everyone just, starts those conversations, talks to people about it, speak up for what you believe in and really do your research. And I think that's the best thing that we can do right now as youth.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's easy when school shootings are brought up to desensitize them, to reduce it to numbers. 4 shot dead, 9 injured. It helps us move on and not get swallowed in grief. That is not how we should move forward as students. School shootings are not another statistic. Those who are now dead had families, friends. They were people like us. They got up every morning, they had drama, they loved people, and they had people that loved them. Those injured are not just afterthoughts, they are lives forever changed. They are traumatized children who haven't even turned 18. It is never just those who the bullets hit that are scarred. School will never be the same in Appalachia, in Columbine, in Sandy Hook. Thousands upon thousands of lives have been altered permanently, traumatized. Maybe their friends died. A friend of a friend could have been injured. One of your coworkers could have a kid at one of these schools. It could be like the students at Northview. You don't have to have any personal connection to a shooting. People at Northview were scared to come in the next day, the day after Appalachia, just at the mere idea of losing their life in a place that should be a haven. School is supposed to be a place for friends, a home of education, and a place for, if nothing else, safety. We are now at a point in history where that is not true. Every year that gun violence creeps, it crawls closer to home. People we love are impacted. Places we live grow more uncertain. And school is a less safe space than has any right being. Students should not be scared to go to school. We should not grow so desensitized to shootings that they just become another number, another thing that has happened. We shouldn't have needed Appalachia to wake us up, but it has, and we shouldn't waste this moment. Guns do not belong in school. We should not be scared to be here, and the lives of our generation should not be lost to something policy can prevent. For those who have left us, for those who went to school like the rest of us and were robbed of their right to go back home, we need to fix something.